When the young woman in the lavender dress walked into our wedding hall, I remember thinking she looked strangely familiar, like a reflection of someone I couldn't place. But when she called my new husband Dad, I felt my heartbeat pause. The music kept playing, guests kept clapping, and yet in that single word, the whole world went silent. I didn't know then that my dream of starting a family, of finally having the child we had prayed for, was built on a lie so deep it would take everything in me to recover from it. I met Daniel 3 years ago at a community charity dinner. He was quiet but kind, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. I had just turned 34 and was coming out of a long, painful relationship, one that ended with me learning I might struggle to conceive. Daniel made me believe in peace again. He wasn't the kind of man who brought flowers or made grand gestures. Instead, he showed up when it mattered, waiting outside the clinic when I had my medical tests, sending me soup when I was sick, remembering the smallest details about my day. He told me he'd never been married before. A few relationships, he said once, but nothing serious. I guess I was waiting for the right person. He said that while holding my hand at a roadside cafe, rain tapping softly on the umbrella above us, and I believed him. Within a year, we moved in together. He had a small but cozy house with cream walls, wooden floors, a garden with roses that he said his mother planted before she passed away. I loved how grounded he seemed. After years of emotional chaos, Daniel felt like calm water. We talked about children often. I told him about my condition, how the doctors said I might need help conceiving. He looked at me with such gentleness. "Then we'll get help," he said. "You'll be a wonderful mother and I'll be right there." I remember that night so vividly. We were sitting by the fireplace and he tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His voice was soft and steady, the kind that could make promises sound like prayers. Our life fell into rhythm. I worked from home as a freelance designer while Daniel managed accounts for a construction firm. His job often demanded long hours, but he always called before coming home. I used to smile when I heard his key turn in the door. It was the sound of safety. But sometimes I caught glimpses of something beneath that calm surface. Once he received a call late at night. He stepped outside to answer it, pacing by the rose bushes. I heard his tone shift, not angry but urgent. When he came back inside, his expression was distant. "Work stuff," he said quickly, pulling me close. "They're rushing a new project." Another time, I found a gold bracelet in the glove compartment of his car. It wasn't mine. When I asked, he laughed softly. "Oh, that? It's for my coworker's wife. He asked me to pick it up for their anniversary." I wanted to believe him. And maybe I did. Because when you love someone who finally gives you peace, you don't look for cracks in their smile. When Daniel proposed, it felt like a quiet sunrise, gentle, not grand. We were walking by the lake and he suddenly stopped, holding my hand. "Marry me," he said. "Let's stop talking about someday. Let's start our family now." I remember laughing through tears. I didn't need anything fancy, just that promise, that beginning. The months that followed were filled with planning, small, simple, heartfelt things. We chose a garden venue with white lilies and soft lights. I picked a dress that wasn't too grand but made me feel like myself. My closest friends helped decorate the place, and Daniel seemed genuinely happy. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me, a half smile on his face. "You have no idea how lucky I am," he'd whisper. On the morning of our wedding, I remember feeling calm. My mother, who had flown in from another city, helped me with my veil. The sun was gentle that day, filtering through the trees in golden streaks. Everything felt perfect. Until that moment, the moment she arrived. I had just finished saying my vows. Daniel's eyes were glistening, and as the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, applause filled the air. And then, "Dad?" The voice came from behind the guests. A young woman, maybe in her early 20s, stood there holding a small purse. Her eyes were sharp, not angry, not kind, just searching. For a second, I thought she had mistaken someone else. But Daniel froze. His hand, still holding mine, went cold. "Dad," she said again, her voice trembling this time. "You weren't going to tell me you were getting married?" There was a ripple through the crowd, whispers, shifting seats. I looked at Daniel, confused. "Daniel, what is she talking about?" He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The color drained from his face. "I think there's some misunderstanding," I said quickly, trying to control the chaos. "Who are you?" The young woman's eyes met mine. "I'm his daughter." The silence that followed felt like thunder in my chest. I remember the officiant lowering the microphone, my mother looking horrified, my best friend's hand flying to her mouth. Daniel still didn't speak. "You're lying," I whispered, barely audible. She shook her head. "No, I'm not. My name's Chloe. He left my mother when I was 12. He sends money sometimes, but he stopped visiting years ago. I found out about the wedding from a family friend." I stepped back, my heels digging into the grass. I looked at my husband, my brand new husband, and saw a stranger. "Daniel," I said softly, my voice breaking, "is this true?" He swallowed hard. His lips parted, trembling. "I was going to tell you. After the wedding, I didn't want to lose you. The words hit harder than any scream could. Guests were leaving in whispers. The band stopped playing, and there I was, standing in my wedding dress, my bouquet still in hand, staring at the man who had just promised me forever, a man who'd hidden an entire child from me. That night, I didn't go to the hotel we'd booked. I drove to my friend Mia's house, still wearing my veil. The smell of roses still clung to me, but now it made me sick. I didn't cry at first. I just sat on her couch staring at my ring, because love isn't supposed to feel like this. It's not supposed to come with ghosts that walk into your wedding uninvited. Mia didn't ask questions that night. She just made tea chamomile, the kind that smelled like honey and calm, and sat beside me in silence. At some point, I whispered, "He said he wanted to start a family." My voice cracked around the word family. How do you start one when he's already kept a whole one hidden? Mia placed her hand on mine. You don't. You stop, you breathe, and you figure out who you're actually married to. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Chloe's face, not angry, not triumphant, just sad, as if she'd wanted him to see her, not to ruin anything, but because she needed to be seen. By morning, Daniel had left 6 missed calls and 2 messages. Please let me explain. I didn't lie to hurt you. I thought I was protecting you. Protecting me. That word made me laugh out loud. Protecting me from what? The truth? His past? The girl who called him dad in front of everyone I loved? When I finally went home, the wedding decorations were still up. A string of white lilies along the entryway, balloons deflating by the staircase. The house smelled faintly of candle wax and champagne. Daniel was there, sitting on the couch, still in his crumpled suit. His tie hung loose, his hair messy, his eyes red. I thought you'd never come back, he said quietly. I put my keys on the table. I almost didn't. He stood, taking a step closer. Please, Sarah, just listen to me once. So I did. Not because I wanted to forgive him, but because I needed to understand why. He took a deep breath. Yes, Chloe is my daughter. I had her when I was 20. Her mother, Marissa, and I weren't married. Things ended badly. I was young, stupid, scared. I didn't stay in touch the way I should have. Didn't stay in touch? I repeated, my tone sharp. Daniel, you told me you'd never been married. You said you didn't have kids. You lied about everything that mattered. He rubbed his forehead. I didn't mean to deceive you. When I met you, I was ashamed of who I was back then. I thought if I told you, you'd see me differently. I stared at him. You're right. I do see you differently. I see you as someone who built a life on silence and called it love. He looked down. I wanted to tell you before the wedding, but then you started talking about having a baby and I panicked. I didn't want you to think I was trying to replace her. I shook my head slowly. You didn't want to lose me, so you decided to lose your honesty instead. He didn't answer. For days, I moved around the house like a ghost. The ring on my finger felt heavy, a small circle that carried too much deceit. I found photos tucked inside an old drawer, pictures of Chloe at different ages. Birthday cakes, school uniforms, a little girl with the same dimple Daniel had. Every photo was proof that I hadn't been living a love story. I'd been living in an edited version of his life. One evening, there was a knock at the door. I expected Mia, but when I opened it, Chloe was standing there. She looked nervous, holding a small paper bag. Hi, she said softly. Can I come in? I hesitated, then nodded. We sat in the kitchen. She placed the bag on the table. Inside was a small silver frame, a photo of her and Daniel from years ago. I thought you should have this, she said. He might not have told you, but he used to visit. Until he stopped. Her voice trembled slightly. I didn't mean to ruin your wedding, I didn't know how else to face him. There was no malice in her tone, only hurt. The kind of hurt that runs deep. The kind that shapes a person. I took a deep breath. You didn't ruin anything, Chloe. He did. She looked up, her eyes glistening. He's not a bad man. Just a scared one. But you deserved to know. For a long moment, we sat there, 2 women connected by one man's silence. When she left, I stood by the window and watched her walk down the driveway. The wind picked up her hair, and I thought she really was his daughter. The same quiet strength. The same sadness in her steps. That night, I told Daniel I wanted space. I don't know what I want right now, I said. But I know I can't share a bed with someone whose truth is still hiding in the corners of this house. He nodded slowly, tears welling in his eyes. I'll stay at my brother's place. I'll give you time. When he walked out, the silence that followed was almost peaceful, the kind of silence that feels like oxygen after drowning. Weeks passed. I went back to work, filling my days with deadlines and designs. I tried to lose myself in colors and lines, but every night, the ache returned, not for him, but for the dream I'd buried. One afternoon, I met my mother for coffee. She looked at me carefully. You've lost weight, she said, stirring her tea. And that light in your eyes? It's dimmer. I'm just tired, I murmured. She reached across the table, touching my hand. You always wanted a family, Sarah. Don't let one man's secret make you forget what you deserve. Her words stayed with me, not as comfort, but as a reminder that love built on lies can never carry the weight of real dreams. A month later, Daniel called. His voice was soft. Chloe wants to meet again. She said she'd like you to be there. I think she feels bad about how it all happened. I hesitated. Why me? Because she said you listened. Something in his tone, sincere, weary, made me agree. We met at a quiet cafe near the park. Chloe was already there, holding 2 cups of coffee. Daniel arrived a few minutes later, looking thinner, humbled. For a moment, the 3 of us just sat there, surrounded by the low hum of afternoon chatter. Then Chloe spoke. Dad told me you wanted to start a family, she said gently. I hope you still do. You'd be a great mom. I smiled faintly, tears stinging my eyes. Maybe someday. But I think I need to learn to be a whole person first. She nodded. That's fair. Daniel looked at me, his eyes filled with guilt and longing. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, he said. But if you ever decide to give it, I'll be here. I didn't promise him anything. Because healing doesn't come from promises, it comes from honesty, the one thing we'd lost long ago. That night, for the first time in months, I slept peacefully. Not because everything was fixed, but because the truth had finally stopped hiding. And in the quiet dark of my room, I whispered to myself, maybe it's time to start again. But this time with me. 3 months after the cafe meeting, the wedding dress still hung in my closet, a quiet ghost of what was supposed to be forever. I hadn't touched it since that night. Sometimes I thought about throwing it away, sometimes about keeping it. But every time I opened the closet, I froze. Not out of sadness, but because it reminded me of the woman I used to be. The one who believed love needed to be perfect to be real. Now I knew better. I moved into a small apartment downtown. 1 bedroom, soft beige walls, and a balcony where the morning sunlight spilled like forgiveness. The first few nights were strange. No Daniel, no sound of someone else brushing their teeth, no shared laughter echoing from the hallway. Just me, and oddly it didn't feel lonely. It felt quiet in a good way. I started journaling. Every night I wrote 1 sentence that began with, "Today I chose myself by..." Some nights the line was simple. "Today I chose myself by cooking instead of ordering in." Other nights, it was heavier. "Today I chose myself by not answering his call." Healing, I learned, isn't loud. It's quiet choices, made every day, even when they hurt. Daniel still called sometimes, not to beg, but to check in. Once he said, "I told Chloe everything, all of it. About you, about the lies, about the fear." I didn't ask what she said. I didn't need to. Some truths aren't meant to be dissected anymore. They just need to exist, out in the open, no longer poisonous. Mia visited often. She'd plop onto my couch, holding iced coffee and a bag of fries. "So," she said one afternoon, "have you decided? Divorce papers or second chance?" I smiled faintly. "Neither yet," she raised an eyebrow. "Girl, that's called limbo." "Maybe," I replied. "It's called peace." She sighed dramatically. "You and your poetic healing phase." But I could tell she was proud of me. One day, as I was cleaning, I found the photo Chloe had left, the one of her and Daniel. For a long time, I just stared at it. Her smile. His arm around her shoulders. The ease of it all. Then, instead of shoving it back in a drawer, I placed it on the shelf beside a small plant. Not as forgiveness, but as acknowledgement. The past existed and it didn't have to haunt me anymore. Weeks turned into months. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. My first piece was abstract, shades of blue and gold colliding, messy but full of motion. When Mia saw it, she said, "That looks like freedom." Maybe it was. I began selling small prints online, nothing big, just enough to keep me busy. And slowly, life stopped being about what I lost and started being about what I was building. Then one evening, as the city lights flickered outside my window, there was a knock on the door. It was Daniel. He looked different, older, calmer, wearing a simple gray shirt. In his hands was a small box. "I didn't come to ask for anything," he said softly. "Just to give you this." He opened the box. Inside was my wedding ring, polished, shining. But it wasn't the same as before. Inside the band, a new engraving read, "Truth or Nothing." I looked up at him, confused. "I had it redone," he said. "Because if there's ever a version of us again, it has to start here, with truth. Otherwise, I'd rather lose you than lie to you." For the first time, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before, not guilt, but humility. I took the ring, held it for a moment, then placed it back in the box. "I appreciate this," I said quietly. "But I don't need a ring to remember what truth means anymore." He nodded slowly. "I figured you'd say that." He turned to leave. But before he did, he added, "I'm proud of you, Sarah. You found strength in the one place I was too afraid to look inside yourself. When the door closed, I didn't cry. I just smiled, the small, tired kind of smile that only comes from finally being free. 2 weeks later, I got a message from Chloe. Hey, I'm organizing an art fundraiser at the community center. Dad said you've started painting again. Would you like to showcase something? I hesitated. It wasn't about Daniel, it was about me stepping into something new. Sure, I replied. I'd love to. The night of the fundraiser, I stood among dozens of paintings, each telling a story of survival, heartbreak, and rebirth. Mine hung near the back, that same blue and gold piece. Under it, a small card read, "For anyone who's ever rebuilt themselves after betrayal, you're not broken, you're redesigned." People stopped and stared. Some even cried. But one woman came up to me, eyes shining, and whispered, "Your story is mine too." And in that moment, I realized pain shared isn't doubled. It's divided. After the event, Chloe hugged me. "You're really good, you know," she said. I smiled. "So are you at being brave." We both laughed softly, the air between us warm and real. Then she said something I'll never forget. Maybe families aren't always chosen by blood or marriage. Maybe they're built by truth. That night, back in my apartment, I took one last look at my wedding dress. Then, instead of throwing it away, I took it to the balcony and let the wind catch its hem. For the first time, it didn't look like a symbol of loss. It looked like a goodbye gift to the woman who once thought love meant perfection. Now, I knew love meant honesty, even if that honesty hurt. Sometimes betrayal isn't the end, it's the beginning of truth. Because when the lies fall apart, what's left is the version of you that can finally stand on her own, unshaken, unhidden, and completely free. 6 months had passed since the fundraiser. The world outside had moved on new seasons, new colors, new lives, and I was finally learning to do the same. My apartment had become a quiet reflection of growth, a new bookshelf, a plant that refused to die, and a half-finished canvas waiting for the return of inspiration. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Then one early spring morning, an envelope slid under my door. No return address, just my name, Sarah. Inside was a handwritten letter, the familiar slanted handwriting making my heart skip. It was Daniel's. He wrote that he wasn't asking for forgiveness, only offering the truth, all of it. He told me about his fears, his past, the promises he couldn't keep, and how meeting me had once felt like undeserved hope. But as he said, hope built on lies can't last. He was in therapy now, seeing Chloe every week, trying to rebuild, not for redemption, but for honesty. And he ended by saying that if I ever thought of him, he hoped it wasn't with anger, but with understanding. I folded the letter and sat quietly for a long time, the afternoon light falling across my table like a soft question from life itself. Would I finally let go, truly let go this time? A week later, I saw him again, not by plan, but by chance. At the community park, Chloe was helping with a children's art workshop, and Daniel stood beside her, handing out paintbrushes. He looked lighter, not happier, but real. When he saw me, he paused, then waved. I hesitated before walking over. "Hey," he said gently. "I wasn't sure you'd say hi." "I wasn't sure either," I replied. He smiled, glancing toward Chloe. "Her idea," he said. "She thought helping kids paint might be good for me. Turns out she was right." We both laughed, not to erase the past, but to make it less heavy. Later, when Chloe ran off to get more supplies, he looked at me and said, "You look peaceful." "I am," I told him. It took a while, but I found peace in not needing closure from anyone but myself. He nodded slowly. "That's beautiful." I mentioned the letter. He looked nervous. "And?" "I'm glad you're being honest now," I said. "For Chloe and for yourself." He exhaled softly. "I didn't know if I'd ever earn a moment like this with you again." "You earned it," I said. Not by apologizing, but by changing. Weeks turned into small, gentle encounters at events, mutual gatherings, never romantic, but respectful. He'd help me carry paintings. I'd ask about Chloe. It was simple, human. One evening, we sat at the same cafe where I once learned the truth. This time it felt lighter. I said, "I used to think love was about holding on. But now I think sometimes love is about learning to let go with kindness." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the truest kind." A few days later, Chloe called. Her voice trembled slightly. "Dad's moving to another city. Got a new job." He didn't want to make it awkward by saying goodbye himself. My chest tightened, but it wasn't sadness, it was closure. "Tell him I wish him well," I said. Truly. Months passed. I never saw Daniel again, but sometimes I'd get postcards simple from different cities. One read, "Still learning. Still honest. Hope you're still painting." I'd smile and tuck them away. Because that's all we ever needed now, honesty, finally free from expectation. The last time I thought deeply of him was on a quiet, rainy evening. I was painting again, a small child holding a kite against the wind, the sky breaking open in color. I realized the child looked a little like Chloe. And the kite? It looked like freedom. Stepping back, I whispered to myself, this was never just a story about betrayal. It was a story about truth and what it costs to find it. I signed my name at the bottom, not as Sarah, the heartbroken bride, but as Sarah, the woman who rebuilt herself from honesty. Sometimes the people who break us aren't villains, they're mirrors, showing us the parts of ourselves we've ignored. Daniel didn't just betray me, he taught me the value of truth, the strength of boundaries, and the quiet courage it takes to forgive without forgetting. Because forgiveness isn't letting them back in, it's letting yourself walk free. When I look back now, I no longer see that moment at the wedding as the day my life fell apart. I see it as the day my truth began. Because sometimes life doesn't shatter to destroy you. It shatters to show you what was never real to begin with. I thought I needed Daniel's love to feel complete. I thought being his wife, his partner, would finally make me enough. But in the end, what I really needed was my own honesty. When his secret came out, I wanted to hate him. I wanted to scream, to ruin him, to make him feel what I felt. But instead, I chose something far harder. I chose to face myself. To ask, why did I stay blind to what I already sensed? To realize that love built on silence is not love at all. It's fear disguised as devotion. Daniel's truth didn't destroy me. It freed me from the illusion that I was powerless. It taught me that honesty, even when painful, is always the doorway to peace. And Chloe, his daughter, reminded me that innocence is never to blame for someone else's sins. Sometimes healing begins not in punishing those who hurt us, but in choosing not to pass the same pain forward. Today, when I paint, I don't paint sadness. I paint beginnings, colors that remind me that every ending carries light, if you're brave enough to open your eyes again. If you've ever loved someone who lied to you, if you've ever had your heart broken by the truth, please remember, you are not defined by what they hid from you. You are defined by what you learned when you finally saw the truth. Because healing isn't forgetting. It's remembering without breaking. What about you? If someone you loved hid a secret this big, would you walk away? Or would you stay and try to understand why they lied? Tell me in the comments. And if my story spoke to something in your heart tonight, make sure you subscribe. Because sometimes the hardest stories to tell are the ones that help us find our own strength again. This was my story. Maybe it's yours too.